G'day, mate, 40 here. So I just had a beautiful interaction, and there was this beautiful young woman, and she was confronted with a door that she didn't know how to open. It may have been just too difficult, too heavy for her, and so I just went sideways over her shoulder, and just with one hand I pushed it open, and she turned around and she gave me the most ravishing smile of gratitude, and I had to run off, so no more interaction. But I think that's how diversity should work. All right, we all have different strengths. When I'm around blacks, for example, I'm astounded by the amount of self-esteem that they have and the amount of self-esteem that they wish that I had. And we're studying Rosh Hashanah tonight, so I'll be spending a lot of meals at the homes of friends. And ideally, all right, the husband expresses a great deal of gratitude for all the preparation work that his wife has done to host guests, to get the house ready, to get the Rosh Hashanah. And so men and women have different gifts, all right? Black people, white people, brown people, yellow people, all right, Jews, Christians, Muslims, Mexicans, all right? We all have different gifts that we can contribute to each other. And so I'd like to think this is not a show primarily about rage, but it's about understanding. And so there are certain things that I can just do really well, but I benefit from a second pair of eyes, right? I need a second pair of eyes looking at what I'm working on to catch my blind spots, right? I've been blogging since July 3, 1997, and much of the conversation that I then turn into a blog post is in my head. And so I often miss like vast areas of things that I should be explaining, but because I don't have an editor, I don't have the advantages that come with having an editor or having a second pair of eyes. I often think about hiring an editor to help me improve the most important essays that I've written over the years. So I've compiled a list of my most important writings, and because I benefit from a second pair of eyes. And if you get to work for a large organization, all right, you work for a large law firm, in all likelihood, they have someone on retainer just to help you with regard to ethical questions, right? You can tap all sorts of expertise when you work for a large organization that you can't tap when you work for your own. Megyn Kelly was a rising star in TV news, and she got hired away from Fox by NBC, and she was appearing to be on a very strong trajectory for success at NBC News. And then she differed with the conventional wisdom with regard to wearing blackface. She asked, what's so wrong with wearing blackface? And even though she made a tearful apology, right? She made a tearful apology because she had so much invested in what she saw as her career at NBC News. But even though she made a tearful apology for even asking what's wrong with blackface, all right, her career in the mainstream media was over. Now, she has gone on to create a great show online. And she's on Sirius Radio Network, and she's on YouTube, and she's got millions of subscribers, and she's just doing a great job. But I'm sure there are times that she misses the resources that were available to her when she was at Fox News and at NBC News. So, right, different situations, different organizations, different people. Office space women have often requested me to reach up to higher spaces that they can't reach, to pull things down. On the other hand, there are all sorts of things that women can contribute that I'm not so good at. All right, here's Megyn Kelly.
Has a new book out where he's decided to take on the topic of Israel and the war in Gaza. And in a book that apparently has absolutely no nuance, really goes after Israel. I'm not surprised. I'm sure you guys are not surprised. And so he goes over on CBS Morning News to promote it. And Tony Dokoupil, who my understanding is his ex-wife is Jewish and lives in Israel with his few children. I think he has 3 children. So they live in Israel. He's now married to Katie Tur of MSNBC. But in any event, you know, he's got a real 3 very good reasons to question false narratives around Israel. Really pressed him in a way that I thought was actually amazing. But he's taking all sorts of heat for it on the internet. Watch this.
I have to say, when I read the book, I imagine if I took your name out of it, took away the awards and the acclaim, took the cover off the book, the publishing house goes away, the content of that section would not be out of place.
So depending on the subject area, right, you can get away with different amounts of knowledge and acuity and IQ. And so when Ta-Nehisi Coates was making the case for reparations, right, this is overwhelmingly a low IQ topic. And so Ta-Nehisi Coates received tremendous acclaim for doing a tremendous amount of shoddy work that he can't get away with now when he writes about a higher IQ topic such as the Middle East.
In the backpack of an extremist. Why leave out that Israel deals with terror groups that want to eliminate it? Why not detail anything of the first and the second intifada, the cafe bombings, the bus bombings, the little kids blown to bits? And is it because you just don't believe that Israel, in any condition, has a right to exist?
Well, I would say the perspective that you just outlined, there is no shortage of that perspective in American media. The reporters of those who believe more.
That is a good point, right? I am going to stand up for Ta-Nehisi Coates. So remember, he is competing for attention. He is competing in the attention economy. And so if Ta-Nehisi Coates simply reiterates common talking points that you can find elsewhere in the news media, there's nothing special about him. I am not aware of any mainstream pundit who has been consistently anti-Israel. All right, there are very few. Overwhelmingly, pundits tend to be quite pro-Israel. So I side with Ta-Nehisi right here.
Sympathetically about Israel and its right to exist, don't have a problem getting their voice out.
And it's what I struggled with throughout this book. What is it that so particularly offends you about the existence of a Jewish state that is a Jewish safe place and not any of the other states out there?
There's nothing that offends me about a Jewish state. I am offended by the idea of states built on ethnocracy, no matter where they are. I'm the child of Jim Crow. I'm the child of people that were...
Virtually all states are built on an ethnocracy. So he's a really shoddy thinker. Right? Virtually all nation states were created on at least a partial basis of ethnocracy and were created by ethnic cleansing.
Born into a country where that was exactly the case of American apartheid.
Why is there no agency in this book for the Palestinians? They exist in your narrative merely as victims of the Israelis.
Either apartheid is right or it's wrong. It's really, really simple.
No, it's not really, really simple because in certain contexts, right, apartheid is the only way to keep a nation state operating. Right? So South Africa had the average life expectancy of its overwhelmingly black population dropped by a decade after the end of white rule with the AIDS crisis. So in certain nasty situations, a xenophobic, even racist police state is the single best way to survive in a really nasty world. In other situations, a more open, liberal, welcoming, tolerant, rights galore political system will be more advantageous. So it's not as though there's just one type of political system that is the best in all circumstances.
Ta-Nehisi Coates is not one of them. Weirdly, the left in this country and elsewhere has tried to turn this whole thing into a conflict about skin color and DEI-type principles. As if on cue, Ta-Nehisi...
Well, taking note of skin color is about the most normal, natural, and to varying degrees, depending on the context, relatively healthy human reaction, right? We human beings naturally notice male versus female, and if we can't distinguish between male and female, it's incredibly disturbing. And we naturally notice skin color because it gives us cues about who's likely to be friend or enemy.
Coates enters to say, yes, did somebody call for me? Yes, I love looking at things through that prism. I'm ready. Writes a book as though he's an authority figure and just kind of says like, well, I'm hearing the other perspective everywhere. So I just thought I'd give you, this perspective as, a DEI expert. It's just so infuriating. Go ahead, Matt Welsh.
I have one very important thing in common with Ta-Nehisi Coates that I would like to confess right up top is that I, too, have spent 10 days in Israel on a junket. And also, I have not recently published a book about that called The Message. I think there's a role for humility in this world, and he's not filling it, as far as I can tell. Calling Israel an ethnocracy just strikes me as odd with my admittedly only 10 days in Israel level of knowledge, which is not sufficient to make a lot of calls, but there is an Arab minority in Israel, 2 million strong. That's a weird thing for an ethnocracy to be about, right? I don't know that if you look around the region immediately that you will find such ethnic diversity in the surrounding states or any.
Okay, so Matt Welch is making some good points, but let's be honest, Israel would be better off without those 2 million Arabs in its midst. Right? Israel would be safer. Israel would have a higher quality of life. Israel would be more prosperous. Right? Without the presence of 2 million Arabs and Muslims in its midst. And Israel was created through massive amounts of ethnic cleansing. And Israel went in about 4 years from a population that was 30% Jewish, right? The land that's now called Israel, right? That population at the time of 1946 was about 30% Jewish, right? And Arab. And then by 1948, it was over 80% Jewish. How do you do that? Through an awful lot of ethnic cleansing. That's the best way to create a safer, stronger state in those circumstances.
This Jen Psaki clip that we showed you just a couple of days ago, and we mocked her for her ridiculous lapdog.
Whoops, wrong link.
Any of the surrounding states. Maybe there are that I'm unaware of, which is possible, but I kind of, I'm taking the under primarily. So it's a very strange thing.
Yeah, where are the prosperous, rights galore, freedom-loving Arab, Islamic, Sunni, Shia states? What would you point as the city on a hill that Israel should aspire to?
Thing to put on only Israel. And that's a way also of kind of not expressing a lot of knowledge about, and he does this in the New York Magazine interview, about the founding of states in general. He was like, oh, there should be good founding myths of a state. We have a great founding myth in the United States. Suddenly we like those founding myths. Okay, that's fine. I do too. But like Israel has a bad one. The founding myth of...
Right. People were afraid to criticize Ta-Nehisi Coates because he was black. And so he skated by, just like Democrats tend to get easy treatment from the news media, and so they get to skate by with a lot of mediocrity that eventually gets exposed.
England is what? The founding myth of most countries in Europe is they are ethnic nation states with a dominant ethnic nationality, and they still kind of struggle with those things as when that is your primary definition. Even if you're now a modern liberal democracy and you're pluralistic and you respect the rights of minorities, it adds different things. You can count on not many hands, maybe one, maximum two, the number of sort of successful, actually multi-ethnic, multi-religious liberal states.
Wow. So if you can only count one or two multi-ethnic, multi-religious liberal states, then if liberalism's important to you, you should think very hard about bringing in and encouraging diversity, because we don't have much of a track record of that working. But if you value liberal freedoms and a liberal nation state, right, the more diversity that you bring in, right, the more what you love is in danger.
Bootlicking performance when she had this guy, knowing he had cheated on his first wife before Kamala Harris with his child's nanny. Look, people have marital problems and they make bad decisions when they're married to people that they don't love. All right? However, banging your child's nanny.
Right. Why was Doug Emhoff available for a menopausal Kamala Harris? Right. Kamala Harris is about 50. Right. Not a lot of takers normally for 50-year-old women. Why was Doug Emhoff available? Right. Because he had a string of embarrassing episodes that one of them resulted in his divorce.
Nanny and impregnating her is in a special league of its own. Whatever. He got through the marriage. He managed to somehow remain friends with that first wife, and he married Kamala. I think most of us would have left it alone if he hadn't then paraded himself out there and let the media parade himself out there like he was.
Right. He knew about his track record. I would not be paraded as the embodiment of the new masculinity, right? Because I've had a pretty lurid social life, right? I've had some pretty intense relationships that were not admirable. I've conducted myself in pretty selfish ways in many of my relationships. So why would Doug Emhoff want to promote himself as an embodiment of the new masculinity and be a big political player when he knows he has these many skeletons in his closet? Right? Incredible lack of self-awareness or bad judgment or a reckless tolerance for risk. If he hadn't promoted himself as this embodiment of the new masculinity and Mr. Pro-feminism, right, he wouldn't be nearly as susceptible to these kind of takedowns.
The ideal husband on steroids. Like, he is the new version of what it means to be a real man and eschews toxic masculinity and should really be the role model.
Can people with different hero systems be friends? It depends. It depends. All right. It verges on the impossible for certain combinations of hero systems to work out. And it will also depend on context. So often you can maintain friendly relations with people when things are going good, but then those relations just blow up under different circumstances of more stress.
For my boys and yours, F that. I want my boys to be like my husband, who did not bang the nanny, nor impregnate another woman while married to me or ever. It's insane that they tried to sell us this lie. That was the context in which we raised, before I get to today's news, the following Jen Psaki clip where she interviewed the current second gentleman, the man who could be our first gentleman in a few months, on, I think it was Sunday. Watch.
An interesting part of how people have talked about your role here is how your role has reshaped the perception of masculinity. And I'm not sure you planned on that, but you are an incredibly supportive spouse. Has that been an evolution for you? And do you think that's part of the role you might play as first gentleman?
It's funny, I've started to think a lot about this. I've always been like this. My dad was like this. And to me, it's the right thing to do, you know, support women. When we lift up women, we support women, whether it's pay equity, childcare, family leave, and all these issues that, you know, this post-Dobbs hellscape, women should not be less than.
There's a pop culture phrase, wife guy, which you've kind of been known as. Are you familiar with this?
I've heard about it.
As called a wife guy, a proud wife guy? How do you feel about that?
Well, if I do something annoying to Kamala and she gets upset, I'll just show her that article. Right.
Oh, it's an interesting gesture there at the end with the hand in your face, because that's the news today, that this so-called always supporter of women actually smacked an ex-girlfriend in the face. Either a smack or a punch. It was unclear, according to the Daily Mail's exclusive reporting. That this super guy who's redefined toxic masculinity actually beat a woman that he was dating prior to Kamala. The Daily Mail reports that he did not respond to requests for comment on the article. What does that mean? Is it not even going to be a denial? I guess they'll get around to it. It's just an allegation right now, but let me tell you, take some time today to read that Daily Mail report, because it's incredibly detailed, incredibly, with several friends of the very successful attorney that he was dating, his alleged victim, going to the Daily Mail, providing records to the Daily Mail, speaking in great detail about the call.
Hey, let's have a look at my Twitter feed. And SluggerDoug, right? Doug Emhoff, lecturing Americans on misogyny, the exact moment the press breaks the story of his beating up a woman. Same guy who impregnated his nanny while he was married, made her get an abortion. Democrats' new perception of masculinity. Kamala Harris's husband.
Two guys who actually not only don't trust women, but are literally running on a platform of authoritarianism and misogyny. That literally should be their slogan, because that's what it is. So you want, people who literally are outwardly misogynistic in their policies and the way they talk about women and the policies in which they've already enacted and have talked about enacting, or Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. It's completely binary. A guy.
All right, thinking about Jean Kirkpatrick. She was the American ambassador to the United Nations under Ronald Reagan. She wanted to support the Argentine junta during the Falklands War. She claimed it was about anti-communism. Really, it was just Irish ethnic grievance against the English. So much of world battles and world tensions and world rivalries are dressed up in ideological and religious language when they usually break down to ethnic grievances. 6 years ago, Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi was brutally murdered by Saudi government agents. What exactly did his journalism ever accomplish? I mean, what major stories did he break? I know he's an absolute icon in the news media, and I think it was a bad thing that he was dismembered. But I've watched documentaries. I watched 2 documentaries on Jamal Khashoggi, and I've never read or seen or heard anything that speaks to me in any way how he contributed at all, in even the smallest sense, to a United States or to a world that I want to be part of. Right? I don't see what he did for regular Americans, and I am completely unaware of any groundbreaking journalism that he did. Gypsy gangs are getting into mass shootouts with each others in Lisbon, Portugal. Diversity is their greatest strength. So if gypsies don't like having a bad reputation, then they need to monitor their own behavior and shift their behavior so that it is more pro-social, right? There was a time when Mexican Americans in California were committing a large number of crimes, and then they reduced it so that now people feel safe going and picking up Mexican American day laborers who they don't know and bringing them home and putting them to work. They wouldn't do that if these groups had astronomical rates of crime. I am wide open. I think it's probably a good idea to completely withdraw American forces from the Middle East. We're not stabilizing the Middle East. This is what Politico says, the latest sign of what Biden critics sees as the U.S. increasing impotence in the region. Let's lower our goals and husband our strength for Asia. Right? It is not America's duty to protect Israel. It is Israel's duty to protect Israel. Mickey Kaus summing up the Daily Mail article on Doug Emhoff. A lot of info in this story. The nanny teacher he cheated with claims he caused her to have a miscarriage. He denies it. He paid her off with $80,000 in an NDA. At one point, the police were called to her house for a life-threatening emergency. Warning signs for Harris and the Democrats in Philadelphia as they seem to be losing ground with the working class in Philadelphia. This is an important point, all right? So we have Representative Corey Mills, a Republican from Florida. He's in North Carolina helping to rescue victims. And he says a lot of FEMA personnel are not there because they're being used to resettle illegals, all right? Over 170 people are dead and 1,000 people are missing because of the failures of the Biden administration. We spent billions taking care of illegal aliens, and so we don't have those resources to take care of our fellow American citizens.
Corey Mills, he's been on the ground there for days, helping to deliver much-needed supplies to those hard-hit areas and evacuate some who are stranded. As you remember, he helped rescue Americans from war zones in Afghanistan, also Israel, and in Haiti. Corey Mills, Congressman, welcome. Thank you for what you do for people in these situations. Tell us what you're observing there and what we all need to understand.
Look, the federal
oh, come on, man. I'm trying to run a high-quality show here.
Or getting the necessary needs in here that the people were wanting. And so we've delivered now about 5 tons worth of supplies, about roughly 10,000. We've actually transported about 12,000 pounds between the 2 helicopters that we brought in. Much of which is the only place that you can get in is by rotary wing helicopter. So we've gone yesterday, 83-year-old man, yesterday was his birthday, was showing signs of heart attack or hypertension. So we were able to medevac him and get him out, but also. So that's really where the missing piece is the federal piece. And again, let's go ahead and point out the obvious, which is that FEMA had utilized a large majority of the personnel who should be here taking care of this to be replaced or repurposed, if you will, for immigration resettlement when we need to be focusing on Americans and what's going on, whether it be in Maui, Palestine, Ohio, Florida, North Carolina, or Tennessee.
Right. If you send resources to Ukraine, right, they are not available elsewhere in the world, such as to support vital American interests, perhaps in Taiwan. And if you spend FEMA funds taking care of illegal aliens, they're not available to take care of Americans. Rob Henderson has interesting observations on his Twitter feed. Women are less direct in their aggression. Right? They deal in rumors, gossip, innuendo, threats of friendship termination. Their conflicts are less deadly but more prolonged. Women are generally less forgiving of rivals, more likely to hold grudges compared with men. That's my life experience. Donald Trump and JD Vance have brought a renewed and naked contempt for Haitians into contemporary American discourse. Okay, on what basis would your regular Joe Blow American have respect for Haitians? What did Haitians create in Haiti that we should admire? Right. Overall, have Haitians in the United States contributed more to the tax base than they've taken out in welfare payments? Are their crime rates below the American average, or are they above the American average? It is up to Haitians to create their image in the eyes of their fellow American citizens. Right? Donald Trump and JD Vance cannot bring contempt to Haitians if Haitians have not already created legitimate, rational reasons for that contempt. Right, Peter Schweizer is an interesting investigative journalist, and here he talks about there are many basic ways the electoral system can be manipulated. It's not just the counting of ballots and votes. It begins before then in how our campaigns increasingly are being financed. All right, he is really good on breaking that stuff down. So
Peter Schweizer explains, what is smurfing, and how does it threaten election integrity? By Breitbart News on October 2, 2024. The 2020 election was decided a margin of fewer than 50,000 votes cast in 4 swing states across the entire country. In 4 large cities in these states, Atlanta, Detroit, Philadelphia, and Milwaukee, anywhere from 85,000 to 268,000 votes were added.
Why are we
to Joe
talking about
Biden's total in
Smurfs
the wee
and
hours
other
of
threats
election
to
night?
America's elections today as we enter October?
Well, we're doing it in part because GAI has a report that's going to be coming out on election risks. It's going to outline dozens of threats to our electoral system and also providing solutions. And the thing we have to keep in mind, you read these statistics to me earlier as to how close the last election was. So even something that can turn a couple thousand votes could change the outcome of the election. Those numbers were pretty astonishing you shared with me.
They were pretty astonishing. And before you're troubled by what I'm about to tell you, there's good news at the end. So what's troubling is the last election in 2020 was decided by essentially less than 50,000 votes that happened in 4 swing states.
Across the entire country.
Yeah, in 4 cities in these swing states. And so, people raised concerns because overnight, the night of the election, in 4 cities, Atlanta, Detroit, Philadelphia, and Milwaukee, we saw anywhere between 85,000 and 268,000 votes be added overnight to Joe Biden's campaign. And that, those 4 states happened to swing the election. And it was this sort of magical, mysterious infusion of votes that I think caused a lot of people to have very real concerns.
No. All right. That's nonsense. All right. There's nothing magical or mysterious. All right. Democratic strongholds, right, tend to be lower income. Right. Inner city Democratic strongholds tend to be lower income. They tend to be less efficient at counting votes. That does not equate with just inventing votes. Right, so that certain inner city areas take longer to report their votes says absolutely nothing about whether there's any shenanigans there. The American electoral system primarily depends upon volunteers, and places with fewer resources, all right, they're going to be consistently less effective than more highly resourced places. All right, let's get a little bit more here.
Margaret Brennan, who was absolutely terrible last night. Not only, I'm sorry, she looked like she was stuck in 1992. Had just the whole look, the fashion, the makeup. Don't make that face at me, Mac Welsh. You know it's true. I'm just the only one with the guts to say it. And but she gets out there, and just as it starts to roll and they start to fight on immigration in a way that's really good, like JD is bringing up the specifics of what Biden Harris have done with this app.
Okay, so what makes Megyn Kelly such a compelling performer is that she doesn't have this great big filter, right? She speaks in a natural way. She is not as constrained as much of our elite class. Now, this can get her into trouble, which is why she lost her gig at NBC. But for us, it's an advantage, right? That there is less of a wall between what Megyn Kelly is thinking and what she says. So it makes her more entertaining, more compelling, more fun, as opposed to the more stilted performance that we saw from the CBS debate moderators. They were so stilted. They were so ill at ease, and they were so biased.
That lets illegals come into the country, quote, legally, but it's all a sleight of hand. CBS actually cut his mic. It was egregious. Let me tell you something. As a moderator who has tried to herd these cats on the stage many times, I'm not opposed to cutting a mic if things have gotten totally out of hand. However, I do believe that a strong moderator can stop that, and I think I have a history that proves that. There is a way of communicating with the guys on the stage where you can let them know, I will give you a chance on this. Stand by. Let this person finish. You be quiet right now. I'm coming to you. Or now we're done, right? And she couldn't do it. She's afraid, and she doesn't moderate live debates like that all the time where she doesn't just read her pre-written questions. However, you only cut the mics when now it's past the point of usefulness and they're just talking over each other and they've had their fair say, and now it's just a waste of the viewer's time. That's when you say, I'm cutting the mics and we're moving forward. This was getting to the meat of it. This was right at the heart of what Biden-Harris has done, and JD Vance.
So YouTube fact checks and puts links to stories that that might go against their preferred worldview. So this particular video, there is a big section that YouTube imposes on abortion health information. And you'll get the same thing if you ever talk about voting rights or global warming.
Was moving in for the kill. I mean, he was about to strike body blows, and that's when CBS shut it down, even though immigration is so highly ranked compared to climate change, which isn't. Watch.
To clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status,
fact check,
temporary protected status.
Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the.
Right, the CBS moderator said at the top, all right, we're not going to fact check, and then they repeatedly fact checked only JD Vance. So what the heck is going on there? Right, they have a different hero system from you and me. From the perspective of their hero system, right, the worst thing in the world is ignorance and bigotry. And so if they could do anything to dispel ignorance and bigotry, then it is worth it to go back on their word. So different hero system, we can understand it. Right, they see their mission as fighting ignorance and bigotry.
CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen,
Brennan was just horrible with her obnoxious fact checks. And we've got so much to get to repeatedly to shut off discussions where JD Vance was doing well. It was incredibly obnoxious.
The audience can't hear you because your mic's.
All right, this is the woman who went after Donald Trump because after he was shot, he didn't release a statement bringing down the tension enough, in her view.
Are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process.
All right, I've dealt with women like this throughout my life. All right, they will just use the phoniest excuses, but they are possessing the power, and so they feel completely free to lie to me. My best friend and I, we were separated for 2 years during my elementary school, because in the female teacher's opinion, we were just too competitive with each other, and competition is a really bad thing, right? Women don't like competition. And so boys tend to love competition, and we learn to adjust to the rules of competition. So when women are forced to compete, they often do so without rules. But this kind of pious, I can cut your mic. All right, I have dealt with this obnoxious, lying, fraudulent female face of power throughout my life. I'm not a big fan.
Nora.
I mean, have you had not teachers like that? Have you not had women with power over you who would use this obnoxious language where they would just lie and dissemble?
Oh my God, it's infuriating. Now, you have both candidates telling you they want to fight on this. They want to engage. They're the ones running for office, not you, Margaret Brennan. And she did that time and time again. We have so much to get to. I would have said, they just cut your mics. Turn their mics back on. Turn his mic back on. Mr. Vance, you have 30 seconds. Mr. Walz, you'll have 30 after that. Go. Yep. There's a reason, Camille, they stepped in there.
I mean, it's also just bad TV. Like, I want to see them have that conversation. And I thought multiple times last night, like, these debates, it's interesting. There are ways in which these things are important. Also, it's really outmoded. In the era of Joe Rogan, when folks are tuning into 3 hours of conversation, I want to see these people have discussions with one another, someone who is competent there to help shepherd things and make certain that the conversation is going someplace and not getting horribly circular and obnoxious. But this was exactly an opportunity for them to really dig into the issues and have some kind of.
So I love Megyn Kelly's show, but I don't agree with the point she makes at the end that the future of journalism is shows like hers. All right, her show is an opinion show. All right, we have all sorts of right-wing podcasts and right-wing social media commentators. What we need is strong, solid reporting, right? Attention to detail, right? The social media punditry is not going to replace our need for solid reporting from a non-liberal, non-left-wing perspective.
Of substantive exchange. They were both interested in having that engagement. And her.
Because this is my home state. I'm a senator from there, and I know exactly how the Haitian migrants got there. These are not the kind of legal migrants who wait for years to get their green card and so on. They were given this fast pass thanks to this app that Biden-Harris put in place. And then Tim Walz jumps in to say, that's been there since 1990. And JD Vance was saying, absolutely not. No, it hasn't. We all remember when they put that in place a couple of years ago, it was supposed to solve this problem. It only added to it. And she refused to let him correct Tim Walz. She falsely corrected him. Tim Walz jumps in. JD Vance now tries to correct Tim Walz, but he's not allowed to. And she kicked this whole thing off. She kicked the whole thing off, Margaret Brennan, by saying the crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. So then let them talk about it. There's a reason they didn't want to, guys. And it's the same reason that, according to the Media Research Center, 84% of the coverage on CBS Evening News every weeknight and every weekend has been positive when talking about Kamala Harris. When talking about Donald Trump, 79% has been negative. Literally almost the exact same figure, only reverse on the positivity and the negativity.
Okay, let's go back to seeing what's on my Twitter feed that I have bookmarked. Hezbollah is currently in total chaos, suffering from the worst kind of paranoia, justified paranoia. All sorts of reports in the news media that Hezbollah has lost at least half of its arsenal. How is Israel not safer with Hezbollah lacking its leadership class and much of its arsenal? The group's operative completely lost trust in everything from electronic devices to trusting other people. And there seems to be similar levels of confusion in Iran. So this ballistic missile strike on Israel was pushed for and carried out and executed by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, while Iran's president does not want to escalate. Hezbollah hesitates to choose new leaders because they fear with a new leader, he'll quickly be eliminated due to penetration of the organization by Israeli intel, distrust within Hezbollah, and between Hezbollah and Iran. The distrust is deep. The supreme leader, why do we call him the supreme leader? Call him dictator Khamenei, that no longer trusts anyone. All right, how are Hezbollah and Iran going to be as effective when they can't trust one another? All right, we get new reports about the dangerous nature of the illegal immigrants that we allow to reside in our country. Much of them just get to self-report biographical information on forms, and then they are flown around the country. Okay, big article in The Atlantic. This Hartford Public High School grad can't read. Here's how it happened. All right, I know other people like her. And this is in part on the high school and the education system. All right, so when you're a teacher, you are incentivized not to fail people of color. And so she couldn't read one-syllable words. She couldn't tell time. She didn't know how to count money. She could barely hold a pencil. All right, we're likely talking about someone who's mentally retarded here. So the school system has something to do with it, but that is the responsibility of the state to teach children basic life skills such as counting money or telling time is unbelievably radical, dystopian, and yet it gets smuggled effortlessly into the unstated assumptions of stories like this. All right, good piece in defense priorities, the case for withdrawing from the Middle East. I got sympathy for this perspective. The Middle East is a small, poor, weak region beset by an array of problems that mostly do not affect Americans and that U.S. forces cannot fix. The best thing the U.S. can do is to leave. The immense cost and evident fruitlessness of U.S. wars in the Middle East are widely lamented in American politics, but not enough to extricate U.S. troops. U.S. policy in the region is an expensive and unnecessary disaster. Cost of maintaining forces to protect the Middle East from itself is extraordinary. All right, we're talking about $70 billion a year, apart from the approximate $7 trillion already spent on wars there over the past 24 years. Nothing about the Middle East warrants the U.S. investment there over the past 30 years. Right, we've got 60,000 U.S. troops in the region. We should just leave. American efforts to manage the Middle East make nothing about oil, Israel, or terrorism better. The U.S. would be better off withdrawing and redeploy resources elsewhere. Thanks to affirmative action of primary, secondary schools that dump things down because they don't want the low IQ to fall behind, we have students at elite colleges who can't even read a whole book. The elite college students who can't read books. Asians are the race least likely to believe that America is better than most other countries, the least likely to feel proud or grateful to be American, feel that life in the United States is better than in the rest of the world, or to feel any attachment to the United States. FEMA spent $640 million on illegal immigrants this year, and now it has no money for disaster relief for American citizens. President Biden called on Israel to respond proportionally to Iran's missile attack should Israel agree and hit Iran with the same number. 25,000 rockets and missiles that Iran and its proxies have fired at Israel since October 7. The president called on Israel not to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities, but since Iran targeted Israel's nuclear facility in Dimona, shouldn't Israel respond in kind? Shouldn't Washington, which has helped defend Israel, should it then stop defending Tehran? You can usually identify criminals extremely accurately simply from their faces. Physiognomy may not be destiny, but it really helps. You want to know what parts of Beirut are controlled by Hezbollah? Google Maps tells you, because Hezbollah has taken over entire neighborhoods and prohibits anyone taking photos there. So bombing Hezbollah strongholds in those neighborhoods does not exactly cause me vast amounts of pain. Let's see what Fox has to say.
The VP debate last night told you everything you needed to know about Kamala Harris. She has terrible instincts.
The biggest gut decision I've made most recently is to choose my running mate. Yeah.
Yeah. Tim Walz was supposed to be a normal Midwestern white guy and said this.
I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it.
What? Kamala's right-hand man told 40 million people he's become.
So we knew prior to Kamala Harris ascending to the Democratic nomination for president that she was terrible at decision-making, she was overly cautious, and she was a terrible manager.
Become friends with school shooters. But he wasn't finished.
Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect, and I'm a knucklehead at times.
The question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protest went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor.
Kamala hired a knucklehead who's friends with school shooters to be a heartbeat away from the presidency. You can call that coup insurance. The assistant coach fumbled the ball twice in the first half and never recovered. The Democrats wanted an attack dog, and they got a bald basset hound nodding along to everything Vance said. Walz kept agreeing that American workers needed to be protected against cartels and big pharma. Good. And instead of appreciating American unity, the media said, come on, coach, just play the race card.
I think the civility that we saw tonight may be a mistake by Democrats, quite frankly. I talked at the outset of energizing this base. I was just in Ohio, and many Democrats were livid
about what's going on in Springfield. I think Walz missed an opportunity to really push the racial insensitivity there. There was a sense of trying to be affable, as John said. And I think what we're going to see from this point on is the civility being laid aside.
Civility was a mistake. That's what the Democrats are saying. Walz was Minnesota nice instead of Minnesota nasty. He must not have gotten the memo. You can't be civil to a dictator. And not to be superficial, but did you know Walz is the same age as Greg? Kamala says she's the new generation of leadership. Last night, America saw JD Vance as the new generation. Young, bright, refreshing.
JD Vance was fantastic last night.
And that's just what the ladies are saying. And unlike Walz, Vance came on stage with a theme. We're living.
All right, Jesse Waters knows how to do TV. All right, he's got the right attitude for TV. He's fun, and he's relaxed, and he's not pretending to be something that he's not. Right, it's very comfortable to watch Jesse Waters. He's not as smart as Tucker Carlson, but he's less offensive to advertisers.
Living in Kamala's world, if you don't like it, don't blame Trump.
What you won't hear is that Kamala Harris has already done it because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now, not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record.
Kamala's hiding her record and asking for a promotion that she doesn't deserve. At one point, Vance even sympathized with Walz for having to defend her.
What Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack.
Okay, Mark Halperin thought that JD Vance was just devastating.
But without a doubt, a total mismatch. Now, I think you'll see a lot of enthusiasm for Vance. I think he'll be a stronger surrogate because of his performance. And I think his place in the Republican Party will be elevated because he was able to, as I said, deliver both a centrist message on some issues. Don't overstate it, but I think he was able to on some issues, including on abortion, which is by the acknowledgement of those in the party who are honest, one of the tougher things for them to talk about. Even on abortion, I thought he did great. Now, in reading what Democrats have said, they said on abortion and January 6th, Vance was a disaster because the issues so stacked against him. Those aren't great issues for him, but I thought he handled them as well as I've heard any Republican handle them. His interview with Ross Douthat in the New York Times several months ago was a prelude to tonight, his capacity to explain the MAGA agenda in a way that is palatable to many people in terms of its intellectual underpinnings. And he obviously was extremely well prepared, but didn't seem rehearsed. I thought the civility between them was really nice. And I think Vance was smart to not really go after Walz very much. He focused on Kamala Harris, which is the whole point of the election. He did not even go after Walz on his ridiculous China answer, which, under normal rules of debating, he might have done. So say again, I just can't understand. If you look at the topics chosen by the moderators, if you looked at their fact checking, if you looked at the way they allowed one candidate to respond and not the other at times, I just don't understand how, if they want to appeal to all of America, they could be less biased than the previous debate, but just completely one-sided in how they ran the thing. I don't understand it. It's a diverse country. Both candidates have about support from about half the country, and they chose, as the previous moderators do, to gang up on one side. And I think, again, Donald Trump's feelings will be hurt if he hears a lot of people say this, but he may not be watching. Vance showed how you turn the other cheek. He showed how you stand up to the moderators without being rude. He showed how to speak to the issues he wanted to speak to without being uncivil or rude or insulting. He just stood up for himself. And like I said, I think he really established himself not just as a valuable surrogate for the party, I'm not saying he's the front runner for 28 off of tonight, but he certainly did himself a lot of good for anyone in the party who's a conservative or a MAGA conservative who wants a agenda or a blueprint rather for how to talk about their issues.
They're in the tank for Team Blue, and it's outrageous. Your blood must boil. I know we're used to it. It's not okay to be used to it.
And this is the three major networks too. Let's keep in mind, as we've mentioned before on this program, that it's about the last bastions of places that have truly mixed audiences. The nightly newscasts on the old-timey networks, CBS, NBC, and ABC. So you would think that given that, that it should have the people who work there have a certain type of sensibility that understands that respects that, and that respect then will be reflected in the way that they kind of deal with both candidates and also the people who support their candidates. I suspect maybe less than kind of an instrumental sense of like, we want to make sure that the Democrats do well here. I suspect this is only, we can't guess what's inside human hearts. There's an industry media pressure, specifically around when you're platforming, Republicans and people who with any kind of adjacency to Donald Trump. It's very, very strong internal media pressure to say you must fact check. There was an entire meta debate going into this debate among journalists saying like, oh my God, they're not going to do fact checks. They have to do fact checks. But there's so many journalists who think that ABC did a good job last time with its absolutely very, very loaded, one-sided kind of fact check and follow-ups towards Donald Trump as compared to Kamala Harris. Though it should be pointed out, as we did when we were on with you earlier after the Donald Trump debate, like that shouldn't be an excuse. JD Vance didn't have to, lean on that excuse to not win the debate. He won the debate despite all of that. And I think there's a way a skilled debater can come up with that. But it is, I think that they are sitting there, especially on issues related to immigration, they're ready to jump in with that fact check because they have this sort of internal pressure of like, oh no, he's going to do the lies, and it's a lie that could actually hurt people. There've been, schools have been closed in Springfield. It's a very emotional topic. But a journalist, I think the journalistic sensibility in my view should be, especially with immigration, and that's an issue that I disagree with JD Vance on a lot, right? But especially immigration is hellishly complicated. That is exactly when you let them go back and forth. Well, actually, this law came in 1990. Well, actually, it did this. It did this. Talk about it, because most people don't understand the overlapping rules that go with that and the interpretations of those rules and how that's created this loophole here and this pressure there. It is really, really complicated. So you do a service to reviewers if you let those debates go out. And it wasn't as if they were sitting there and just hurling racial epithets at one another. It was a disagreement about policy. That's what we should want to see. I think
it was totally substantive. Yes, I agree. But what we heard from Margaret Brennan all night long was, we have so much to get to. In fact, we have a bit of that. Watch, SOT 10.
Supercut.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
But
Thank you. Senator, we have so much to get to.
Margaret,
we have so much to get to, Senator.
pathway.
The audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics.
Oh my God, she's so irritating.
It's very, very irritating.
Right? I mean,
Megyn,
one of my irritants about.
Right. There's one thing when people tell you to your face what's the score, but when you try to manipulate them, as Margaret Brennan does, it just infuriates us.
Watching these debates has been like the need by these moderators, I mean, the women in particular, to try to be like total humorless ball busters. Like we saw the Lindsay Davis clip, like, there are no states in the union in which they are executing the babies at all. And then you see, Margaret Brennan, we have so much to get to. Or Nora O'Donnell with all the scientists agree that climate change is real and the earth is overheating. And then you had Dana Bash at the first debate with she was actually the worst. Her face never moved from the Mr. Vice President, Mr. President, former President Trump. I don't understand why these women they think that being taken seriously requires nothing but seriousness, even if it feels false and affected. You can smile, you can show warmth, you can have a sense of humor where the situation calls for it. It's an utter fail that maybe they don't have personalities. I don't know these people personally. Maybe they really are just this way in real life. Truly, they might have no personality. Maybe that's what I'm stumbling into. I mean, I will say the one time I met Nora O'Donnell in person, we were at one of those radio and television correspondent dinners, and we were in the gowns, and we kind of walked next to each other, and we shook hands, and she shook my hand like she was Arnold Schwarzenegger. She gripped it, and she shook it so hard. And I was like, I hate to tell you, but you are communicating exactly the opposite of the message you want me to receive. Right? Everything you're telling me is that you're insecure. It's not working. I think you're trying to project strength, and you're doing and that's exactly what that does. humorless, and I will play right into the stereotypes of the uptight left-wing nasty woman, right? Like, just fucking have a sense of humor. Let a little smile out. Like, it's just painful.
The handshake of somebody who sleeps with their nanny.
That would stress you out.
I am the Doug Emhoff here. I'm the new man, so I am not going to comment on these ladies.
Was like a surgeon cutting with precision into the bullshit being.
Yeah, Megyn Kelly is so much fun, and she has a legal background. She's right? JD Vance performed like a surgeon.
Offered by Tim Walz. And one of my favorite moments was when he described Tim Walz's law that repealed a law that requires the care of infants born alive after botched abortions. There was a law in the book since 2015 in Minnesota that said if a baby's born alive after botched abortions, which horrifically happens more than you would think, the law said you must provide life-saving care to the baby. And Tim Walz repealed that law and changed it to just comfort care. You can let the baby die. You do not need to save that baby's life or do anything to try. And Vance raised it. Walz denied that he had done it. And JD looked at him and said, what that I said is incorrect. Do we have that moment, you guys? I think we have this. Let's watch it. Stop 5.
You're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric.
These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
There's no special knowledge that doctors have with regard to the morality of taking the life of an infant, of a baby, of a fetus, right? There's absolutely nothing about being a doctor that gives you special wisdom with regard to that kind of killing.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved.
Okay. So he tried to say, it's not true. I didn't do the thing you're saying. And then when Walz was like, well, what specifically is not true? Walz is a lawyer. Sorry, Vance is a lawyer. Walz is not. So Vance is looking at Walz saying, what about my assertion is incorrect? And Walz's response was, it was fact-checked at the ABC debate. This is the moment to which he was referring. Watch.
Her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born.
Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate.
Just utterly dishonest, because that fact check completely ignored that it is legal to let an infant die on the table after you attempted to kill it in the womb, but it nonetheless survived. That's thanks to Tim Walz. And by the way, we pulled the stats from 2015 to 2023, which was the date Tim Walz repealed the law requiring life-saving care. 24 babies were born alive in Minnesota after an attempted abortion. Think of how horrific that is. This mother goes in, forgive me, I'm trying to do this without passing explicit judgment on abortion, but she goes in to kill her baby. These are late-term pregnancies. The baby nonetheless is birthed, and it lived. It survived the attempt to kill it in its mother's womb. And then she attempts to kill it again. She lets it suffer to death there on the table, and the doctors don't have to intervene. And so 24 were born alive after an attempted abortion between 15 and 23. They were required to try to save the baby during that period, and most died. And then as of Tim Walz's repeal of that law in 23, we don't know how many times this happened because he removed the requirement. He said, you don't have to save their lives and you don't have to tell us when this happens. Those are the facts, Moynihan. That's just an overview on the fact check and an insight into one of the dynamics. He was allowed to get away with this. There was no attempted fact check, of course, by the CBS moderators on that. They only had them in pocket for JD Vance.
I mean, look, Matt mentioned earlier that the worst moment for Vance was on the 2020 election. And that was because Tim Walz turned to him and asked him a question. And this incredibly bad moment for Walz is when JD Vance turns to him and asks him a question, which I cannot believe he wasn't prepared for. I mean, that and the Tiananmen thing, which I suspect we'll get to. But that tells you a lot about the moderators, by the way. You have the two kind of most impactful for me moments in that debate is when the two candidates are allowed to interact with one another.
So I didn't have any strong feelings about Megyn Kelly when she was at Fox. She was just fine. And I didn't like the question that she posed to Donald Trump in that initial 2015 Republican debate. But in a different situation, in a different context, now that she's out on her own, she's just thriving. So some people accompany men, right? Some people work best in the context of a large organization. And then other people like Megyn Kelly, they just come alive doing their own thing. And luckily for Megyn Kelly, all right, she got to cash in the $20, $30, $40 million that NBC was required to pay her, even though they fired her.
Ask them pointed questions. I mean, and Camille is right too, that why, I would love for JD Vance, and I think I know why he was doing this. Keep in mind that the whole strategy, this completely insane, bizarro, please fire your political consultant strategy, was to paint him as a weirdo. Do you remember this? He's a weirdo.
Walz is.
Yeah,
we have this. So he did this on Jen Psaki's show before he was selected as her running mate. And this was apparently what.
So Megyn Kelly is 53 years of age. I mean, she looks great, but 53 years of age. So she's got 3 children, right? She's had 3 children. She looks great. And it's a good thing that women put some effort into looking good. All right. It's a good thing for them, most of all. And it's a good thing for the rest of us. Now, there comes a point where the effort that you put into your appearance would be better spent elsewhere. But Megyn Kelly at 53, thank you.
What dazzled Kamala so much, she chose him. Here it is, and then I'll let you take it.
These are weird people on the other side. They want to take books away. They want to be in your exam room. That's what it comes down to. And don't, get sugarcoating this. These are weird ideas. Listen to them speak. Listen how they talk about things. Listen to how your previous guests were right. Like you said, they've told them that they shouldn't talk about race. They can't help it. It is built into their DNA because there is no plan.
Go ahead.
I just want to say that Jen Psaki is a real crackerjack question. She's just really good at it. Weird when you hire Biden's press spokesman. Anyway, I will say this, that whole weird thing, I mean, obviously Vance's response to that last night was to be incredibly normal and incredibly...
So Tim Walz launched the weird put down of Republicans. And when you go low, all right, you encourage other people then to go low against you. And so one of the great descriptions of the debate last night is that it looked like a victim of child molestation confronting his abuser, right? Those were the visuals.
Relatable, which I think is what he is when he's talking about policy. If you throw the guy into a donut shop and do the, political thing where you have to press flesh, maybe he's not great at that, but I honestly...
He's the opposite of Trump in that way, Moynihan, right?
Trump's not Trump in that way.
Yeah.
Almost
Trump's not as great at the policy or the debates, but he's amazing in the one-on-one and real people settings.
Yes, he's absolutely fantastic. And this is the yin and the yang thing here. They balance each other out wonderfully in that sense that he decided to play it nice. I saw a lot of people and people that I know saying, really should have pushed him on a lot of this stuff. And he was being too nice and saying, we agree on this. We agree. But it was actually a nice breath of fresh air in some ways. But I will say, I want to go back quickly to the Doug Emhoff.
So I think women make a mistake when they stop coloring their hair, right? For some women, all right, a tiny minority, all right, there's no reason for them to color their hair, but most women look better when they color their hair and put a little effort into their appearance.
Thing, because I read that this morning when I was on my way into the city. And, the same caveats. 3 people unnamed, it just dropped. I have no idea if this is true, but that's not what I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is the exact same thing that happened with Hunter Biden. People say Hunter Biden's not running for president. In a way, I'm not interested in that either. What I'm interested in is the fact that the president's son and, the vice president's son, and the vice president had Ukraine in his portfolio, all of a sudden gets a job for an extraordinary amount of money that he's not qualified for. Doesn't pique your interest at all? Literally not at all? That's incredible to me. This is the same thing that I'm not going to predict the future. I have no idea if people will.
All right, here's some commentary from Democrats.
Their game of hide and seek with the media was eventually going to come back to bite them. And last night it did.
I've been bewildered a little bit by the absence of both the presidential candidate and the vice presidential candidate on television since they became the nominees, because that's how people get to know you. It may be a little bit of a problem for Walz, having not done this. You know, sitting with you guys is good prep for debates. It's good batting practice for these events. Walz has not been doing it.
Vance's edge over Walz was undeniable, and MSNBC had a hard time processing it.
It's the audacity. I agree with you that we're in year 9 and no one knows how to cover the audacity. The audacity is it someone should have said, stop it, stop.
Why would you think a bald head look is a good look?
Stop. Are you effing kidding me? And they should have dropped that F-bomb, right?
Now, the media who slimed Vance out of the gate as a sketchball set such low expectations that when Democrats laid eyes on him, unvarnished, they liked him.
So I was getting texts from Democrats, panicked, quite frankly, who were saying, wow, he's really moderating himself on a lot of these issues. He's the most likable he has ever been.
JD charmed the socks off the country, and now the media looks even more dishonest, if that was possible. Vance's talent as a debater is too big to rig, and he's gotten himself into fighting shape, sparring with the press for months, fighting off cheap shots, working out his policy chops. And just like the Biden debate, the media can't spin it.
JD Vance came to this debate to land a bunch of punches, and he did.
The two issues driving the campaign right now are Harris has a big deficit on the economy, Harris has a big deficit on immigration, and Republicans were happy tonight and Democrats a little bit nervous that on those two issues, Vance carried it.
Vance clearly, I think it needs to be said, clearly the more experienced debater, the slicker speaker.
He was spending a lot of time in the first half or 2/3 proving he read the briefing materials, and I was missing the magic and the organic spontaneity of Tim Walz.
I wonder why Walz didn't have the magic.
I think that Walz did seem unsteady, and frankly, what I saw in Walz is somebody who has not faced questions on a national stage since he became the Democratic nominee. He was simply out of practice. I mean, I don't know why they've done it, but they've kept him out of the limelight. They've kept him away from reporters. They haven't had him do any interviews, and he was clearly unsteady through much of that debate.
The media is complaining that Walz wasn't ready for the debate because he hasn't been doing interviews. You guys haven't been interviewing him. You haven't been demanding answers. You travel on his bus, you travel on his plane, and you get nothing. You don't write columns that he's a coward. You don't tweet that he needs to man up. You get on TV and say, hiding's a good strategy, keep it up. But now they're complaining. The media is complicit in this, just like they were with Biden. But today, all of a sudden, the media was really curious about how Walz could let them down.
Do you want to clarify the comments that you made about school shooters?
Yeah, and look, you got to see me. These folks know me. I'm super passionate about this. The question come up about school shooting. We're talking about everything except school shootings. And I sat as a member of Congress with the Sandy Hook parents, and it was a profound movement. Yeah, look, I have my dates wrong. I was in Hong Kong and China in 1989. That move from Hong Kong into China, it was profound for me. I need to be clear, I will tell you that, but here's my whole point on that thing with China. I do understand China.
Okay, I'll talk to